Recessions don't strike all Americans equally. Some regions bend but don't break. Others crumble under the weight of job losses, collapsing industries, and evaporating wealth. If the United States tips into recession in the coming year, it won't be a blanket storm. It will be a patchwork of uneven pain. And certain states, because of their unique economies and vulnerabilities, will feel the brunt harder than anyone else. For decades, Americans have believed in the strength of diversification, that the U.S. economy is too vast, too complex, too resilient to fall apart. But history tells us that while the nation as a whole may stumble, certain states fall further, faster, and take longer to get back up. The economic storm gathering. The whispers of a potential recession have grown louder. Inflation remains stubborn in key sectors, interest rates are still historically high, consumer debt is piling up, and corporate layoffs have rippled across industries from tech to retail. Even if the U.S. avoids a full-blown collapse, many analysts agree that a slowdown is inevitable. But here's the catch: the impact won't be even. States with highly specialized economies, those reliant on just one or two industries, are the most exposed. A single domino can topple everything. Others are weighed down by fragile housing markets, skyrocketing insurance premiums, or fiscal problems that have been kicked down the road for years. In short, some states are better prepared than others. Nevada, the fragile glitter of Las Vegas. On the surface, Nevada looks like a permanent boomtown. Las Vegas glows like an electric mirage in the desert, its skyline pulsing with casinos, luxury hotels, and a never-ending stream of tourists. The city sells the idea of limitless opportunity, a place where anyone can strike it rich overnight. But peel back the neon glow, and you find a state whose prosperity rests on a fragile foundation. Nevada's economy is like a casino bet itself, thrilling when the dice are hot, devastating when the luck runs cold. Tourism is Nevada's lifeblood. Nearly 1 in 4 jobs is tied to leisure and hospitality. Dealers, waitstaff, hotel clerks, performers, valets, cooks, and cleaning crews. In good times, this is a goldmine. When the economy hums, millions flock to Las Vegas, Reno, and Lake Tahoe, pouring money into slot machines, shows, and sprawling buffets. But when times turn bad, that reliance becomes a curse. During the Great Recession of 2008, Nevada became the face of America's economic collapse. Unemployment skyrocketed past 13%, the highest in the country, and entire neighborhoods turned into ghost towns. Foreclosure signs sprouted like weeds across the suburbs of Clark County, and brand new developments sat abandoned, half-built shells baking in the desert sun. For years, the state struggled to recover, a sobering reminder of how quickly a boom can flip into bust. Fast forward to today, and the risks are eerily familiar. If a recession takes hold, the first thing families cut is travel. Vacations disappear from the budget. Conventions shrink or cancel altogether. Corporate retreats and big-ticket events get postponed indefinitely. For Nevada, that's a financial earthquake. Casinos, restaurants, and hotels, the very pillars that keep the economy standing, will see foot traffic vanish almost overnight. Add to this the fact that Nevada's housing market is once again overheated, with home prices climbing nearly 30% since 2020, and you have a dangerous cocktail brewing beneath the glitz. Consider the story of a blackjack dealer in Henderson. She bought her starter home at the peak of the market in 2022, convinced the boom would never end. But then the recession hits. Her hours are cut back, tips dry up, and her once manageable mortgage suddenly becomes an anchor pulling her under. The dream she worked so hard to build unravels. Multiply her struggle by thousands of dealers, waiters, show techs, and rideshare drivers, and the picture becomes clear. Nevada isn't just at risk. It's sitting squarely in the bullseye. The state's dependence on one volatile industry leaves it uniquely exposed. Unlike states with diversified economies, Nevada doesn't have a cushion of manufacturing, finance, or tech to soften the blow. Its gamble is all in on hospitality and tourism. And in a recession, that bet almost always loses. Florida, paradise on the edge. Florida has long been sold to the world as the land of endless sunshine, white sandy beaches, and unlimited opportunity. From retirees chasing warm winters to young families chasing affordable homes, the state has attracted millions with the promise of paradise. But just like we saw in the recent South Florida housing panic, Florida's dream rests on foundations far more fragile than its marketing would suggest. A staggering portion of Florida's economy is tied to three volatile pillars: real estate, tourism, and services. Together, they generate enormous wealth in good times, but when recessions hit, they collapse almost overnight. Tourism alone accounts for nearly 1 out of every 6 jobs in the state, from hotel clerks in Orlando to bartenders in Miami Beach. Real estate has fueled rapid growth, with developers flipping swampland into subdivisions and high-rise condos at a pace unmatched by almost any other state. And the service sector, restaurants, retail, entertainment, depends on disposable income, which is the first thing households cut back when times get tough. Already, cracks are showing. Insurance premiums in Florida have soared to unsustainable levels, with some families paying $6,000 or more per year just to cover their homes. In many coastal counties, insurers are pulling out altogether, leaving homeowners scrambling for coverage from state-run programs. Housing affordability is at historic lows. Median home prices in places like Tampa and Miami have climbed beyond what average wages can support, forcing many families into dangerous levels of debt. And layered on top of all this is the constant threat of climate risk, rising seas, stronger hurricanes, and flooding that chips away at long-term stability. If the U.S. slips into recession, Florida's so-called boom could unravel with frightening speed. Retirees, many living on fixed incomes, may find themselves forced to sell just to keep pace with rising costs. Young families who stretched to buy during the pandemic-era frenzy could wake up underwater on their mortgages, owing more than their homes are worth. And the backbone of Florida's economy, its tourism hubs like Miami, Orlando, and Key West, would be among the first to bleed jobs. Fewer tourists mean fewer flights, fewer hotel bookings, empty restaurants, and shuttered attractions. For a state with such heavy dependence on visitors, the domino effect could be brutal. The 2008 financial crisis offers a chilling precedent. Florida was ground zero for the housing collapse, with entire neighborhoods in Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and Miami left abandoned, streets filled with half-finished homes, construction equipment sat rusting, and property values plummeted. Families who had once dreamed of a Florida life packed up and left, unable to hold on. While lending standards are stronger today and the banking system is more cautious, the structural vulnerability hasn't changed. The state is still betting its future on industries that vanish at the first sign of economic trouble. Picture a young couple in Orlando who bought a 3-bedroom home in 2021, right at the market's peak. They work in hospitality, one at a resort, the other in food service. When a recession hits, hours are cut, tips dry up, and suddenly their mortgage is eating half their income. They dip into savings, then credit cards, and before long they're staring at foreclosure notices. Multiply their story across thousands of families, and it becomes clear why Florida, despite its glossy image of paradise, is perched on the edge of crisis. Texas, the energy roller coaster. Texas has built its modern identity as a symbol of relentless economic strength. For decades, the Lone Star State has marketed itself as the land of opportunity, a place where low taxes, business-friendly policies, and wide-open space combine to create a climate for growth. And it has worked. Fortune 500 companies have relocated to Texas in droves. Cities like Austin, Dallas, and Houston have ballooned into economic powerhouses, drawing millions of new residents chasing jobs, cheaper housing, and a lifestyle fueled by optimism. But prosperity in Texas has always carried a hidden vulnerability. The very engine that drives its success is also the one that could grind it to a halt. Energy. Oil and gas remain the beating heart of Texas's economy. From the Permian Basin to Houston's energy corridor, the state's wealth is still deeply tied to the price of crude. When global demand surges and prices climb, Texas thrives. Skyscrapers rise, corporate bonuses flow, and small towns boom with new jobs. But when prices collapse, as they did in 2014 and again during the pandemic, the fallout is brutal. Rigs shut down. Engineers, geologists, and roughnecks alike face mass layoffs. Local economies that seemed invincible suddenly hollow out. If a U.S. recession takes hold, energy demand will inevitably sink, dragging Texas down with it. Entire regions like Midland, Odessa, and Houston could see thousands of jobs vanish almost overnight. But energy isn't the only weak spot. Texas has quietly built another problem: debt-fueled growth. During the last decade, as more than 4 million new residents poured in, housing markets in Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio went white-hot. Home prices in Austin alone surged more than 60% in just 5 years, far outpacing wage growth. Families stretched themselves thin, often taking on massive mortgages under the belief that the boom would never end. But a recession threatens to expose just how fragile that foundation really is. If layoffs ripple through tech in Austin, finance in Dallas, and oil in Houston simultaneously, thousands of households could find themselves unable to make payments. The danger is compounded by Texas's rapid transformation into a hub for the tech industry. Companies like Tesla, Oracle, and Apple have expanded operations in Austin, turning the city into a Silicon Hills. But tech is notoriously vulnerable during downturns. When the market tightens, stock options evaporate, venture funding dries up, and pink slips start arriving in waves. Suddenly, that $700,000 starter home purchased at the peak in 2022 looks like a crushing liability rather than a symbol of success. Picture an Austin software engineer who relocated from California, lured by the promise of cheaper living and booming opportunity. He buys into a shiny new subdivision, counting on stock grants and steady raises. But when the recession hits, his company slashes staff, his portfolio tanks, and the mortgage that once seemed manageable becomes impossible. He stops going out to restaurants, cancels subscriptions, and cuts back on spending. Multiply that by tens of thousands of families across Austin, Dallas, and Houston, and the ripple effect spreads. Restaurants close, retail slows, contractors go unpaid, and the cycle feeds on itself. For Texas, the danger isn't just about losing jobs. It's about exposing how much of its recent prosperity has been built on unstable ground. When energy prices tumble and housing markets cool at the same time, even the mighty Lone Star State will feel the sting of recession. California, from tech titan to trouble spot. California has long been the beating heart of American innovation, wealth, and culture. Silicon Valley defines the modern tech age, Hollywood shapes global entertainment, and the state's vast farmlands feed the nation. On paper, the Golden State is an unmatched economic powerhouse. But beneath that success lies a troubling truth. The very industries that make California rich also make it uniquely vulnerable. When a recession arrives, strengths can quickly turn into weaknesses. The biggest fault line runs through the technology sector. Silicon Valley, stretching from San Francisco to San Jose, has already shown cracks, with companies shedding jobs in waves over the last 2 years. Tech is an industry built on growth, investment, and constant innovation. When capital dries up and markets tighten, layoffs aren't small. They come in floods. A deeper downturn could trigger mass layoffs across giants like Google, Meta, and Apple, as well as countless startups that rely on venture funding. And because the Bay Area housing market is one of the most expensive in the country, those job losses would cascade into real estate almost instantly. Homes that sold for millions during the boom could suddenly sit empty, foreclosures rising as incomes vanish. Hollywood, California's second crown jewel, isn't immune either. Entertainment may be glamorous, but it is also fragile. When recessions hit, consumers cut back on movies, streaming subscriptions, and theme park trips. Studios delay productions, cancel risky projects, and downsize crews. Thousands of behind-the-scenes workers, from set builders to camera operators, often feel the brunt of cutbacks long before executives do. A prolonged recession could choke one of California's most iconic industries, leaving Hollywood sound stages quieter than they've been in decades. Then there's agriculture, a pillar often overlooked by outsiders but vital to the state. California produces more than a third of America's vegetables and 2/3 of its fruits and nuts. Yet farming here faces immense challenges: ongoing droughts, rising water costs, and increasing pressure from climate change. In a recession, global demand for exports weakens and already thin profit margins shrink further. Smaller farms, already struggling under debt, could collapse entirely. Rural regions of the Central Valley would bear the brunt, with farm workers, many already living paycheck to paycheck, facing sudden unemployment. The high cost of living magnifies every one of these risks. In cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, where median rents exceed $3,000 a month, even modest job losses can push families into crisis almost overnight. Homelessness is already one of California's most severe and visible problems, with sprawling encampments stretching across city blocks. A recession threatens to make that problem explode, as more working-class families fall from stability into poverty. And the strain isn't limited to households. California's state budget is heavily dependent on income taxes from the wealthy, particularly those tied to capital gains in the tech sector. During boom years, billionaires cashing in stock options fill state coffers with billions in revenue. But when markets fall, that pipeline dries up. A recession that tanks tech profits could blow a multi-billion-dollar hole in public finances, forcing budget cuts to education, healthcare, and infrastructure. California is undeniably resilient. Its size, diversity, and talent pool make it one of the strongest economies in the world, not just the United States. But resilience doesn't mean immunity. The sheer scale of its vulnerabilities, sky-high housing costs, over-reliance on volatile industries, and extreme inequality means that when the U.S. economy sneezes, California doesn't just catch a cold, it risks catching pneumonia. New York, finance on the brink. If there's one state where the word recession sparks immediate fear, it's New York. For better or worse, the state's fortunes are tied to Wall Street. When finance thrives, New York prospers. When markets tumble, the ripple effects are brutal. A slowdown in banking, trading, or investment banking translates directly into layoffs, budget shortfalls, and a pullback in consumer spending. The 2008 crash turned Manhattan into a ghost town of empty offices and shuttered storefronts. Another downturn could bring a similar wave. But New York's struggles won't be limited to finance. High costs of living mean that even middle-class families are stretched thin. Rents in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens remain some of the steepest in the nation. If jobs vanish, there's little cushion. And unlike states with more affordable housing, residents don't have much wiggle room before slipping into crisis. Tourism, another key industry, is also recession-sensitive. Fewer international visitors, fewer Broadway tickets sold, fewer hotel bookings. The impact cascades down to restaurant workers, cab drivers, and small businesses. And then there's the state budget. New York relies heavily on tax revenues from its wealthiest residents. If Wall Street bonuses shrink and investment income falls, Albany faces tough choices: cut services or raise taxes, both of which could deepen the pain. For a state that never sleeps, a recession could be a rude awakening. The ripple effects across America. The hardships of these 5 states won't remain confined within their borders. When Nevada's casinos empty, Florida's housing market falters, Texas oil slows, California tech stalls, and New York finance contracts, the entire national economy feels the pressure. Supply chains are disrupted, consumer confidence dips, and ripple effects spread into states that thought they were insulated. What happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas anymore. The people behind the numbers. But beyond charts and percentages, recessions are lived experiences. They're the stories of individuals who lose jobs, families who watch savings evaporate, and communities that struggle to hold on. In Las Vegas, a cocktail waitress might see her tips vanish overnight. In Miami, a young family may realize they can't keep up with insurance premiums. In Houston, an oil field worker could face another painful layoff. In San Francisco, a tech employee might watch their dream home slip into foreclosure. In New York, a subway commuter may overhear hushed conversations about lost bonuses and shrinking paychecks. These are the human costs of recession, invisible in spreadsheets, but painfully real in everyday life. The U.S. economy is vast, complex, and resilient. It has weathered downturns before, and it will weather them again. But resilience doesn't mean immunity. And if a recession strikes, the impact will not be evenly spread. Nevada, Florida, Texas, California, and New York, 5 very different states tied together by one common thread: vulnerability. Each, in its own way, has built prosperity on foundations that can shake in a storm. The question is not whether the storm will come. It's how strong it will be, and which parts of America will take the hardest hit. As the nation holds its breath, one truth remains clear. Recessions don't just test economies. They test people, communities, and the very idea of the American dream.